Good morning, everyone. This is Holly Vega with Military Home Base, and we are continuing our series with Iris Green, the CEO of Military Home Base. And we're talking about last week, living in Florida, you just never know.
Yeah.
We always have where the power goes out, a storm comes up, or someone hits a transformer. And so all the cable kind of went out last Tuesday in the middle of us talking. So we're going to...
Your kids were thrilled by that, by the way.
Oh, yeah, they were just so excited, yeah. And there was no TV to watch. However, because Florida's so used to this, we have to command it. It did come right back on like an hour later. But that was a great hour in my household. So we're continuing, though, with ours and the realities of real estate.
Yep.
And what we were talking about was... new construction.
Yes.
And we left off right at the home inspection.
Yeah, so we were talking about how it's important for you guys to have new construction inspected. And we kind of went over the different stages just really, really briefly. But dialing back, even when you contract, your realtor is not legally allowed to interpret a builder contract. That is for an attorney. That is not us trying to get out of doing our job. We cannot act as attorneys. That being said, builders do not change their contracts, and it will always be in favor of the builder. So another good reason to have a realtor on your side is that, going back to what we said last week, leverage. I can sell 50 homes in there. You as a homeowner are only going to buy one. So a realtor is going to have a little bit more leverage.
And leverage meaning, explain that.
So leverage meaning, I can sell 50 houses in a year. You're only going to buy one. Who's going to have more leverage if something goes sideways? Who's going to have more leverage to get negotiations rolling again? I'm not saying always. There are some instances where the market is just so, it's moving at such a pace that nobody has leverage except the builder, because there's not a lot of inventory out there. So it all depends on the market, and that's why it's important to have a realtor.
When you say this means when some of our friends say, I got a new refrigerator, I got blinds, I got my garage door opener, you know.
There are some builders that include that as a part of the purchase package. There are some that have incentive to negotiate, and so we'll add those things on in the negotiation process. But if you're in a market that's moving very, very quickly, and this builder is selling out of homes as soon as they get permitted, you don't have a whole lot of leverage. You just don't. I mean...
and this is something we talked about last week, where the land got purchased.
Yes.
So explain that real quick, because this did happen to one of our customers.
Which one are we talking about?
About when they bought the land and not even the streets or anything had even been put in.
Oh, yes.
So this is all about new construction. Because, hey, I see this piece of property. I like this piece of property. Someone got a step ahead before.
Yeah, so the permitting process in every district is going to be a little bit different. So it's super important that you work with a realtor that is not only familiar with VA loans, but if you're building from dirt on a private lot, they should be well versed in VA construction loans. Not that they should step in the role of the lender, but an understanding of how the process works is very helpful for you as the consumer. As far as getting ahead of yourself, so if you have a situation where the subdivision hasn't even broken ground, but they're pre-selling lots, you want to make sure your realtor is following up on what is going on with that community. Meaning, when are the roads scheduled? Have permits been pulled? We can find that information online, by the way. You just have to know where to go. So we do the digging on your behalf so you don't have to. And that means on our part, a weekly call. Just like with the inspections. Having a realtor means that I'm managing, if you're my customer, I'm managing those inspections. What does that mean? It means I am riding herd on your project manager, on your construction manager, so that I can make sure that your inspections are done in a timely fashion and they don't get ahead of themselves. So if you have a pre-drywall inspection that you've already paid for, you don't want them putting up drywall before you've had that inspection. And that's just
really good.
Yeah. So going back to dirt, building from dirt.
Yep.
You still want to have your inspections. Yeah, no matter what. Inspections. So typically when you build a semi-custom, which is what I find most military families do, we don't see a lot of from dirt because it is an extremely expensive and time-intensive process.
I would assume that would be more for like your forever.
Usually, yeah. Usually those are, you're looking towards retirement or you're already retired.
Looking for land.
So most are going to go with the semi-custom option, meaning that it's all packaged together. You only close once the house is built. So I do want to stress, we mentioned last time about making sure you do your structurals. Well, what does that mean? Structurals are windows, doors, ceiling heights. I know this is going to sound strange, door heights. 8-foot doors make a huge impact on your home. On the way it feels inside. And if you've ever been in a home with 8-foot doors versus one with the standard doors, you'll notice the difference. It's definitely an upgrade. Structurals also include things like floating outlets in the floor. That means that you don't have to run a cord. If you float your couch, you can have a plug underneath the couch.
I want a floating cord. I want a floating outlet.
It means gas drops. If you know at some point you want to go ahead and put in an outdoor kitchen, you want to go ahead and make sure that you have your gas drops put in because it's cheaper to have the builder do it and it looks more clean. You're not going to have to go through the wall or around walls to have that piping installed.
I don't know if you're like me, but I have a folder. It's on my lap, on my desk I used to get. And every time that she mentions something or I see something, I drop a picture in there. Because you will forget and this will come back. So make a file. Make a file of all the wish things that you would like to have.
Yeah. If you want a generator, get the pre-wire for a generator. The plug's already there.
That would be a great thing here in Tampa.
And in a lot of areas, especially, I think we've
snow,
got our
up in the snow.
Up in the snow.
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of things you want to think about. If you think at some point you might want to add an indoor gas fireplace, you want to make sure the plumbing's there for you to do that. Maybe you'll never do it, but maybe you will. And that's an upgrade you might be able to get at a more cost-effective price.
And would that be a benefit too if you're thinking about ever reselling?
Yes.
Those are things that people...
Selling points, true. Very, very true. So those are structurals. Those are the things we talk about. You want an extended porch, things like that. Those are things that have to be done before you're permitted. Plumbing, electrical, surround sound, all the stuff you want done with the home move-in.
So they each have to have a permit?
It depends on the jurisdiction. I'm not really going to go into permitting too much because it's such an area specific. But what is important is for you guys to make sure those structurals are in place. So even if you're not going to do those upgrades right now, you have the capacity to do them at the most cost-effective rate as possible. So you definitely want to spend your design dollars there before you hit the design center. And I will tell you,
because most people do the opposite.
Well,
they were finding
they go super skimpy on the structurals, and then when they get to the design center, all the pretty stuff happens. They spend their money there, and they realize, oh crud, I picked my structurals and I didn't put a gas drop. Well, now the builder is going to charge you a change fee, so it's going to cost you more to have that gas drop.
Is that everywhere?
Usually, but you know, sometimes depending on the builder, your realtor can finesse that a little bit for you.
That's the leverage.
That's a little bit of leverage, yeah. I will also say it is not super. Most buyers don't necessarily ask their realtors to accompany them on the design center visit. Now, I like to be there for my customers during the design center visit for a couple of reasons. Number one, I know what sells and what is just from an investment perspective, return on investment, that sort of thing. If you're going to be in a home for 3 years, you don't want level 6 granite countertops. Why would you do that if this isn't your forever home? Because you're not ever going to get that money back. It's either you have granite countertops or you don't. So,
and most people don't know what a level 6 is.
Well, when it's the really pretty one.
It's
the really pretty one that add $15,000 to your overall purchase price, money that you could have put into having luxury vinyl planks instead. So just, it's a good idea for you to have your realtor with you to dial it back. It's very easy to get carried away when you're selecting finishes, and it can be very expensive. Often builders will put in there that you have to bring additional cash and be prepared to write a check at the design center.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you go $100,000 over, you're probably going to write a check for $50,000 or $60,000. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Because the house still has to appraise.
And if you do that, call me because I want to go with you to see all the pretties you got.
They have some gorgeous things that you can do. Just you need to decide if this is your forever home or if this is your for right now home. If it's your for right now home, really dial back the finishes and determine what can be done after the home is
We
finished.
should go to a design place. Like
A design center?
yeah, let's do it.
You can do that.
Yeah, and talk to
Yeah.
them. So that way we can say like, hey, maybe this is a better choice. This would be Holly's foo-foo choice.
Well, but see, that's also market specific. So there's some parts of the country where the brown color schemes are starting to come back. In our area, the grays are still very strong. That's going to affect your finishes. And the cost of the finishes, because painted cabinets are usually more expensive than natural cabinets.
See, let's go. Let's go to design.
I'll see what we can arrange.
Let's arrange that.
But if you're being discouraged from bringing your realtor to design center appointments, it's important that you insist that you have that option. Because my job is to make sure you don't go too crazy over budget and spend a lot of money you don't need to spend to get the look you're after.
So maybe when you have a realtor, these are questions that you should be asking.
You should absolutely ask. Absolutely ask. So your design center, everything. So the final walkthrough, I like to call it the blue tape walkthrough. So we have, in our area, and I'm sure most markets have this, you get a roll of blue painter's tape. And once you've done your walkthrough, your final walkthrough with your inspector, that means they're going through and they're picking apart the house with all the little things. Every builder contract has a margin for error. What does that mean? They're allowed to make errors up to a certain percentage on the installation, paint, all this of various items. And that is disclosed usually in your contract. So when that happens, your realtor will go with you to your final walkthrough. We will tag things. They usually hand me a whole roll of blue tape because I'm known to be really, really stickler. Odds are they're going to fix everything. Sometimes they don't. It's up to you.
Legally, they do not have to fix everything?
If it's within a certain margin.
Okay.
So if you see
find
a
out what that margin
find
is.
out what that margin is. So, well, they'll tell you. When
gonna
you're
tell
doing
you?
the walkthrough and you call them on some imperfections, they will tell you, oh no, that's within the margin of error. So for example, where I see that a lot is in grout lines. If there are crooked tiles. If certain tiles are raised a little higher than others, that sort of thing.
So how do you find out what those margins are for your area? So
well,
you
it's
already know
not
what
your
the builder-
area. It's
not-
in your contract. It's builder specific.
So each builder has a certain margin. So there's not like a standard. There's not a...
They may have an industry standard, but I would not rely on that. I would go into the contract because the contract is what you're bound to.
So if you're thinking about building, picking that perfect property, making sure that the roads and everything, and having a realtor that goes back and make sure that this is keeping updates so that the land that you originally wanted doesn't get marginally smaller, right?
Well, it can't.
I mean,
It
it sounds
usually
like
can't get. I know what you're dialing it back to, but we can't go there.
We can't go. Okay,
Because we can't go there. If they change the lot, that's leverage.
Okay.
If they change the dimensions of the lot, that's leverage. If they've moved the lot because there was a shift in coding or in building code, in neighborhood code, whatever, if there was a shift there, that's an opportunity for leverage.
Okay.
So it's up to your realtor to know where the opportunities for leverage are.
And then go from there.
Yeah, and I will say the more productive the agent, the more leverage they're going to have.
So that's why it's so important finding the perfect realtor for you.
Yeah.
And then inspections. Even though it's new property, you should
talked
still
about that,
have inspections.
Yes,
Inspections on
absolutely.
every single thing. Then you also want to talk about the windows and the door sizes. And hey, I need to think about this 8-foot door now. I need to go somewhere she can show me.
You can.
Because I have standard here.
Yeah.
There's no 8 foot.
8-foot doors
Yeah,
are
they're not big
absolutely
people, so.
beautiful, and it's an instant luxury upgrade for your house. And it's usually pretty affordable. For here, I want to say most builders, it's anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000, and they
that's
usually
not-
only do it for the first floor. Because the second floor usually has slightly lower ceilings. At least in our market, that's the way it is. But those 8-foot doors are a really nice luxury
I want
touch.
to go see a house of 8-foot doors now. So we got to
We'll go some models.
Some
model
models.
housing.
That'd be another little episode. That'd be fun, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then lastly would be read the contract from your builder.
So
read that so that you know
that's
what the
a scary
margin,
prospect.
because a lot of people go in and look.
You haven't seen what one of those contracts
I'm
looks
sure it's
like
like 20, 30 pages more.
You need to double that.
Okay.
Yeah, you're looking at
someone
sometimes
who understands it to go
pages.
over.
Talk to the builder rep while your realtor's sitting there and ask your specific questions and have them point out where in that contract it is so you can read it right.
So let's add those questions today to this top, like a few questions,
Okay.
a few of them, because what questions do I ask?
Okay, number one, the VA financing contingency. Make sure you read that. There are some builders that put in there that they will hold you to the property whether it appraises or not. Whether they actually enforce it is something totally different. If you see that, you or your realtor should be bringing that up. There is a builder here that does that, and every time when I come in the door, they know that that is not going with my customer's contract. It just isn't, because I don't want to tie my VA buyers to having to spend an extra $20,000 for a home that didn't appraise, and that's what that part of the contract does. Now, whether it's enforceable or not is a completely different conversation. So you want to make sure the financing contingency is there for VA. The second thing you want to make sure you understand is the timeline for monies. So when you're building from dirt, your earnest deposit is generally a little higher. And there's a schedule in which you can do those deposits. Make sure you're very clear on what that schedule is. Number two, make sure you're very clear on what's happening in the design center, because usually you set your budget when you sit down to contract. And that's a builder specific thing. But they say, okay, you know what, I only want to spend $50,000 in the design center, which I know you guys, that sounds like a lot of money. It really isn't.
It adds up very quickly.
It adds up really, really fast. That's probably flooring, upgraded kitchen, and maybe upgraded bathrooms. You can absorb all that in $50,000. So I would make sure that you're clear on what happens if you go over that budget. Are you going to have to bring a check for another $10,000 if you go $10,000 over? What happens then? And what happens to that check at closing? Because you guys know VA financing is 100% loan to value, meaning that we don't have to pay a down payment if it's below the VA loan cap. So make sure you understand what happens to that money. Is it applied back to your side of the table? Because if so, it may be worth it for you to go ahead and spend that money. The other thing I would make sure you're clear on is if you have a home to sell. In our market, and I'm sure most markets have something similar, so you can kind of use this as a rough reference point. Again, all real estate markets are a little bit different. There's two contingencies that can come into play, and it depends on what's happening in your market. There is a home to sale contingency and a home to close contingency. The home to sell contingency means that you still have a house to sell. It may be listed but not under contract, or it may not be listed. That's a home to sell contingency. A home to close contingency means, yep, I have a house to sell. It's already under contract. We close in a month, or we close in 2 weeks. That puts you in a better bargaining position than a home to sell contingency, because a home can sit on the market for a long time, and if you're overpriced, it could sit even longer. So you definitely want to make sure that that is addressed in your contract if that's pertinent to your situation. The other thing to look at is the financing contingency, to see if there's something in there that prevents you from using the home to sell as a part of the financing contingency. And talk to your realtor about that. Your realtor or your real estate attorney, they can go into greater detail on what all that is. Those are the big ones. And make sure it's written in there that you can have inspections, independent third-party inspections. If they're not allowing you independent third-party inspections, I think you ought to take a step back and ask yourself why. Ask your realtor why, and decide if you're comfortable moving forward with that builder or not.
For me, I would not be. And
Some people are. Some people are. I mean, there's a misperception that when you go into a new construction, it's perfect. The house is going to be perfect. There's not going to be any issues.
You got to think about, it's got to settle.
The house has to settle. You know, you've got, okay, so this is going to sound weird. One of the things I always recommend you do at a final walkthrough is go in, put the toilet seat down, and sit on the toilet. You would be amazed at what's at eye level right there. The imperfections and the lack of attention to detail that happens at eye level when you're sitting.
And then that gets us to the last part, is in that contract, make sure about what their margin is.
Yes, what the margin, well, To be fair, I've never had, it's very, very rare that I've had a builder invoke that. And that had to do with flooring, and we ended up making them replace about 2,000 square foot of hardwood floors anyways. So that margin for error comes into play, but only rarely, at least in my area. So,
but it's something.
It's something to know. It's something to have in the back of your mind.
Because I would not know that. I would not. I mean, like, I would think that if you did your walkthrough, that would mean that tile needs to be replaced. You need to replace it.
Yeah. So
and then I would be shocked to
when
say,
they said, "Well, no,
what's your
I'm
margin?"
sorry,
Then I would
that's
be
the
my wheels
margin
be
for
going
error.
like, "What's the margin? What are you talking about? Let's get a ruler out." Like, right? Like, what you talking about?
Yeah.
So that's good to know, because I've not done a new build. So if you've never embarked on that, we have had homes, but they've always been already.
So I would recommend, if you're going to have a hard copy of your contract handy, I would recommend you have a cover sheet that you've created that basically has all the pertinent information that's of most interest to you on that first page. If it's margin for error, margin for error. If it's the deadlines for your deposits, put the deadlines on, put the dates. While I would love to say realtors are we're all very good about following timelines. We live by the contract. However, there may be times we have an emergency. My buyer's agent had an emergency earlier this year that it caused her to be unavailable for quite a period of time. And we were able to work it, but if you're working with an individual agent, you want to make sure you're covering your bases too, and that you're protected as well. Your realtor is going to have your best interests at heart, but sometimes life happens. We're people too.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I think that's about it. The blue tape walkthrough, you go through, you do it. They either fix everything before you close, or they don't. You get a punch out that says they're going to come within X number of days after.
And then when this is all done, do you get like a certification or something? Is there something that states that this is what's wrong, what's got to be fixed, this is what's
Sometimes.
good? Sometimes.
Only sometimes. There are some builders that won't give that to you, and you have to go on faith that they're going to do what they said they're going to do.
So is that something that you need to maybe put back in your contract?
You can't.
You can.
They won't change the contracts. They usually will not change the contracts.
So
you have to run on faith that they do it, and you have to rely on your realtor's leverage that they do it. Now, I will say a lot of them have a 1-year warranty for workmanship. So what will happen is, let's say they don't finish everything within that year. I would say wait until like month 11. They'll come back. You might even want to have another inspection at that time. They'll come back and make repairs. Now, again, going back to the contract, what does your contract say about what repairs they are required to do at that annual walkthrough?
So that would be on that top sheet, and that
would be on the top sheet. So they might say, okay, you know what? We are an all-in builder. We will fix paint. We will fix this. We will fix that. We'll fix cracked tiles. Or they might say, yeah, we don't touch paint or cracked tiles. This is only for structural items. If you have a crack in your wall, that sort of thing. Stucco cracks are not included. It all depends on the builder. So make sure you have a clear understanding of what that part of your contract looks like.
And so we're going to close on that note.
Okay.
And for next week, I would like first to touch on why then is this a great job for our military spouses, because we see that many of them change careers from being, especially teachers.
Yes.
Because it's so hard to, certified, and then
well, teachers are they're just not paid enough for what they do.
And I appreciate it. So you see a lot of that, but then a lot of our military spouses want to be a realtor so that they can take, because we're mobile, we gotta go, and so they want to be mobile. So that, a couple of questions have came up as like about the schooling and all that. So let's dig into that for next week.
Yeah, we can do that.
And for you to say
careers in real estate.
Yeah, careers.
We'll talk about the different career options
and different things that you can do to benefit and better yourself.
Yes. There are a lot of opportunities in there for you guys to do that.
Okay. Well, thank y'all for joining us. And that was great, Iris. You're educating me all the time, and I love learning. And on that note, Military Home Base brings you home one base at a time. Thanks.
Thank you.